here. So yeah, I want to know, Sterling, you got 5 free agents. Where are you looking at? Who are you looking at, and where do you think they're going?
Well, yeah, as we discussed, we tried to pick 5 different free agents each. The tough thing with this is I was trying to find teams that have current cap space available. For at least one of these guys, I think there's better options for where he may land, but I'll tell you about that when we get there. So first off, I was looking at Brandon Sheriff. There's going to be a lot of teams looking at him, I think. A lot of teams need that offensive line help. I was hoping my Steelers would get him. I still hope my Steelers get him, but I have a feeling with the big changes that need to happen in Cincinnati, more protection for Joe Burrow, I really think that Cincinnati goes out of the way and spends big to make sure Brandon Sheriff comes there to really solidify their offensive line.
Yeah, I gotta agree with
my
you on that
first
one.
would be Brandon Sheriff going to the Cincinnati Bengals. Second on my list was Allen Robinson. Now, we've discussed him a few times in the last month or so because, he has been a Bear for a while now, and, we know he's not going back there. Where is he going to land? I think with that big trade news that we'll discuss later that dropped of Russell Wilson going to the Denver Broncos, I think the Broncos make a strong push because they're going to need more offensive weapons for Russell Wilson. Right now, all they have is a young tight end, Jerry Jeudy, and Cortland Sutton, which I don't think are enough offensive weapons for Russell Wilson to be successful. So I think they go out and they try to make a push and bring Allen Robinson in and make him a Bronco next year.
Wow, definitely not exactly where I thought he was going, but yeah, that is a very interesting, something that I necessarily didn't think of beforehand. But yeah, no, that would be an interesting spot for Allen Robinson to go to. And honestly, it might not be a bad option because he gets to go into an offense that does have some decent weapons around him, and this will easily be the best quarterback that he will ever have the likelihood of ever playing with again.
Right? Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't even on my radar either. Like, if any other quarterback had landed in Denver, I don't think Allen Robinson goes there. I know we had talked about maybe him ending up in Washington, which was it was a close tie between those two.
Yeah.
But I think John Elway will offer him more money, which will result in Allen Robinson going to Denver instead of Washington.
Yeah, one thing with John Elway is he's definitely stepping more out of it. He's more of like a consultant now. This is some of the things that I have learned in the last
Fair.
week or so. I still think he has some say in Denver for sure, more than what people are probably going to give him credit to. But from what I've heard, when it comes to like the new ownership group that is working with the Broncos, it sounds like he's going to be more of like an inside consultant more than anything.
Okay. So he's not making as many of the big decisions. That will be a good thing for Denver.
Yeah, I think so as well. Which, yeah, he might have had some help with the Russell Wilson situation, but yeah, it does sound more and more like he's more of a consultant as opposed to a, you know, leading force within the organization. But yeah, continue on.
Yeah.
I do like that Allen Robinson going to the Denver Bronco Donkeys.
Yeah, it's sort of still a 50-50 between them and the Commanders.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure where he lands, but I think Denver now, with getting Russell Wilson, that will be a big push for them, is getting another outside wide receiver.
Yeah, and I think if, for instance, there was only 2 teams that were going to go after him, and that falls between the Washington Commanders and the Denver Broncos, the Commanders can offer him all the money in the world, but I think he's probably going to look at playing with Russell Wilson as opposed to a guy that we'll talk about later in Carson Wentz. But yeah, continue on.
Right. So yeah, next on my list was Chandler Jones. He's been a mainstay in Arizona for a little while now. I don't think they're going to be able to afford to bring him back. Since they haven't re-signed him yet, he's going to hit that free agent market. An interesting one I had for him was there's a team out there that they've got a lot of cap space, and I think they're going to look to bring in some veterans to add to all the rookies and first round picks they've had lately, including the ones they're going to take this year. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars will go out and spend money to bring Chandler Jones in and just bring that veteran presence in on the outside line to sort of match up with the defensive end we are both pretty sure they're going to take. And they're pretty solid on the inside in their middle linebacker core. The outside, they do have some youth, but it's not... I think Chandler Jones would still be an upgrade there.
The one thing that I will say about that is, obviously when we get to the mock draft coming later in today, they still do have Josh Allen from the edge rusher's perspective. If they were to bring in a guy like Chandler Jones, that tells me that it's going to be both of those guys kind of like as their 1-2, and we'll see. We'll see what happens there. That's kind of the only one so far that I'm looking at like as a probably not. If he agrees to kind of go into that number 3, kind of number 4 role for the Jags, I could definitely see that happening. But yeah, that's definitely interesting thought there.
Well, and I think that's what it's going to be. It's going to be more of a mentor role for him and a fill the gaps. You know, because Chandler Jones is pretty versatile as well. He doesn't just have to play that outside linebacker. You know, he can come in, he can cover in the middle. He could probably come up onto the line as well and cover for a play or two just to let a guy get a breather. So,
yeah,
I don't think his playtime would take too big of a hit. He won't be the marquee guy anymore, though. And I think that's the case anywhere he goes. I don't think he's going to be that marquee guy on any team that he goes to.
Fair enough.
So after that, I had on my list Steven Gilmore, who, as we know, was traded from the Patriots to the Carolina Panthers last year. This was the tough one for me because there's a few teams out there I thought he could go to, but they don't have that cap space. And looking at the teams that need that cornerback and have the cap to afford him, I see him re-signing in Carolina at that point. You know, because there's not a whole lot of other options really that I think he would want to go to. If they had the cap space, I think his for sure landing spot is the Dallas Cowboys. But they're going to have to do a lot more work to be able to afford him at this point. So, you know, pending some cap space coming available for some other teams, I think Steven Gilmore will stay put in Carolina with the Panthers.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. I think Carolina, obviously trading for Stephon Gilmore last year, they clearly wanted him. He's a former Defensive Player of the Year winner. So, you know what? Yeah, is he a little bit aged? And in his last year with New England, was he as polished? No, but I still think letting him go is not as advantageous. And plus, they drafted a young corner last year who didn't play at all. So it'd be nice to allow Gilmore to still take that pressure off of I'm forgetting who they drafted, but it was a young guy who was really, really talented. But I think it would be foolish for the Panthers to let him walk. So I got to agree with you there. I think he's probably gonna stay in Carolina.
I think so too. I don't think he's going to be a day one signing, though. I think he's going to hold out for a while and see what some of these other teams do, what sort of space is made. Because, yeah, like I said, I think the Dallas Cowboys are the best fit both for him and for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I hear you.
Just because they've got such a good, solid young core on their defense, you know, especially in that front seven, that he would be a good fit, especially with that new young safety as well.
Yep.
And last one on my list was another boy out of Chicago in Akeem Hicks. And that was, for me, similar to the Chandler Jones situation, actually. He's a veteran presence that I think the Jacksonville Jaguars will bring in to be that relief guy, that mentor guy for some of these young players that they've got on their defense, and just help solidify that line in case that young draft pick isn't quite ready to go, or we see some injury problems or anything like that. Because the Jags have some decent cap space available. They can go out and spend on some of these defensive players to really solidify their defense and allow Trevor Lawrence to not necessarily have to put up 30 points a game to win. And I think that's a key for Jacksonville next year is they need to find a way to be winning games at 21 points, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I hear you.
Just to take that pressure off of Trevor Lawrence.
So actually, one of the teams that I was kind of looking at, particularly for Akeem Hicks, was actually your Pittsburgh Steelers. And the reason that I say that, and I know you are the Steelers, they don't bring in big time free agents. The way that I look at it is he's not going to be there to be your starter. He's going to be that rotational guy. And I think Akeem Hicks knows at this point, for instance, if he goes to a team like the Steelers, he's really only there for 2 years. He doesn't have a whole lot of tread on his tires, and he has been injury prone. So for him going into more of a rotational role would be huge. And I think for the Steelers, that actually might be a really good pickup because the Steelers were really bad at stopping the run last year, as we have discussed multiple times. And I think it would be it'd be beneficial to have a guy who is one of the better run stopping defensive linemen in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that one would come down to a decision that has to be made by both front office and the player himself. They need to figure out what's happening with Stephen Tuitt. Is he coming back next year or is he retiring?
Yeah, I hear.
We had a whole year of will he, won't he play. I understand he had a lot going on in his personal life, but a decision needs to be made at this point so Pittsburgh can either move on or expect him there at training camp this year.
Fair.
And if he does decide he's going to play, great. Then we don't need to necessarily get that line help. It's more the inside linebackers where a lot of that run game was really hurting us.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Are those your 5 guys?
Those were my 5 guys, yeah. So who did you have for your 5 free agents?
So my number 1 is Tyron Armstead, tackle from the Saints. Obviously, he's not going back to New Orleans unless something pretty shocking happens, I'd say. Obviously, the Saints are in cap hell. I think they're like $50+ million over the cap currently. So even if they wanted to bring him back, I don't think they could. Very similar to your Brandon Sheriff. I have him going to the Cincinnati Bengals. And my big reason here is that the Bengals do have some cap space. They want to protect Joe Burrow. I think that is going to be their main focus. I think they're going to completely overhaul that bitch. They're going to bring in the best guard, the best tackle. They're going to draft an offensive lineman. Doesn't matter if it's a tackle, guard, center with their 31st pick. They are going to completely look at Joe Burrow and go, listen, you brought us to a Super Bowl with dog shit in front of you. And we came so close. We're not letting that happen again. We are not letting anyone touch you. You are our golden boy. So I genuinely believe that they are going to look at, for instance, the top guard in Brandon Sheriff, bring him in. Top tackle in Tyron Armstead, bring him in. And then Ryan Jensen, he's not on my list, but he's the top center coming out. I have a funny feeling that they will probably go after him as well, just completely rehaul that. They will be throwing money at offensive line.
That'll be the tough one, is that third one. Because the first 2, I completely agree. I think that's what they're going to do. But those 2 alone will probably net about $25 million out of the 33 that they have available. And I don't think they then go drop what's left on a center. I think they build the rest through the draft, and then they keep that little bit of cap space available for the draft picks, as well as for something else, another hole that they need to fix.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And they don't even necessarily need to bring in that top center. I just have a funny feeling that the Bengals this year are going to go hard and aggressive on the offensive line. So for my number 2 free agent, this is a former Chicago Bear, didn't play with the Bears last year, but this is quarterback Mitchell Trubisky. Over the scouting combine and kind of like the week leading up to it, there was a lot of news and rumors that Trubisky is going to get himself a massive deal heading out of free agency. Or heading into free agency, which I know you're shaking your head, I'm shaking my head, we're all sitting back going like, fucking Mitchell Trubisky getting a big time deal, But the more and more that I think about it, the more and more it's likely to happen. And I have him going to the New York Giants. I think the Giants obviously bring in both their general manager and their head coach from the Buffalo Bills, where he served as a backup last year. Brian Daboll, who is the new head coach of the Giants, he's looking at Trubisky going, I got to see and work with this kid all of last year. Maybe we saw something in past that we didn't see last year. You know, I think the Giants are probably they're I don't think they're gonna be it's gonna be a super long contract. I don't think we're gonna see like a 4 or 5 year contract. I think we're probably gonna see something like 25 plus million for the next 2 years for each year. So I genuinely think that the Giants would be willing to look at Trubisky and go, yeah, we're gonna give you a $60 million contract over the next 2 years. Just see what you can do. But yeah, funny enough, I think Trubisky is going to be one of those guys that is funny enough, a hot commodity this offseason, which kind of feels sick in my mouth to say that because I never thought after last season that I'd be saying Mitchell Trubisky is a hot commodity at quarterback. But these are the rumors that we're hearing, so.
And honestly, that's one of the only teams that I could see paying for Mitchell Trubisky. Any other team he would go to, I think it would be a 1-year deal just to bring him in to compete for that starting job and prove himself. It's like,
Yeah.
prove you're worth the big contract first to us. But yeah, with the Giants, that's probably one of the only teams that I could see paying out for him. That or maybe the Texans if they move on from Deshaun Watson.
Distinct possibility, but yeah, it was. I don't think I don't think people should be terribly shocked when we see a Trubisky massive deal come next week. But yeah, looking at my number 3, I have Von Miller, edge rusher. He's going back to the Donkeys. He really is. You know, he never wanted to leave Denver anyways. He went and won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He had a great time. I think, you know, he's going to say to the Broncos, listen, just sign me to a 2-year deal. I don't need to be superly massively overpaid. Just bring me back to the team. He loves Denver. He wants to stay in Denver. You know, he was really upset leaving Denver because I remember when he got traded, like he was doing his press conference, he was crying. He was unhappy about it. He had fun in LA. He won a ring, and now he's looking at it going like, yeah, I'm gonna go back home. Like, what? Like, yeah, might as well go back home. I got massively paid. I won a championship. Why not go back? So I think he is going back to the Broncos, and plus he gets to play with Russell Wilson and potentially win a 3rd Super Bowl for his team again. So who knows? But yeah,
I think you're right. I think he goes back to the Donkeys. I don't think they win a Super Bowl though.
Yep. that division, we're gonna get into more of that conversation here in a bit, but that is going to be an interesting conversation. But yeah, my 4th player here is middle linebacker Bobby Wagner, recently released by the Seattle Seahawks. I would say a little bit of a surprise move by Seattle to release him. Obviously, it looks like they're going completely full rebuild here.
Not only a surprise to all of us, but a surprise to Bobby Wagner. They didn't even tell the dude they were cutting him.
Yeah, he found out on Twitter.
Right? Like, that's horrible.
Yeah, to me, that move kind of, I look back at it and go to the Ryan Fitzpatrick situation where he found out that he was no longer the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins and he was being replaced by Tua on Twitter. Not even on Twitter. Like he found out from his son's friend who was at his house and he was like, "Oh, you just lost your starting job." And Fitzpatrick just kind of looks at me and goes like, "The fuck you talking about?" Kid shows him the tweet. He's like, "What?" Like haven't even been told. But yeah, it just a horrible situation for Bobby Wagner. But you know, funny enough how we were talking about Akeem Hicks earlier, and you were saying you need a linebacker to come help stop the run. That's actually who I have the Steelers going after, is Bobby Wagner. And I know the Steelers, we say it every week, they don't spend big in free agency. I don't think they're going to be spending big anyways on Bobby Wagner. I think they're going to say to him, hey, we have this young kid in Devin Bush. who desperately needs some serious mentorship, and you are the perfect guy to do it. And I think for Wagner, him going to the Steel City would be pretty nice. He gets to play for what is normally a team with a historic defense. They always do really, really well with their defense, with their defenders, especially linebackers. And he can continue that long tradition of amazing defenders in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, and we're gonna have a gap in that linebacker core with Joe Schobert moving out anyway. And so
Exactly.
there'll be a space for him. I'm sure they will still draft a middle linebacker, but they've got to get back to this developing stage where they're not just drafting a guy and throwing him to starter right away. So it
Yes.
would be good to bring in somebody like a Bobby Wagner who can help mentor these young guys like Devin Bush and whoever they happen to draft.
I agree. And
The only
last,
other one I was looking at for Bobby Wagner was possibly staying in that division just to really stick it to Seattle and going to San Francisco,
yeah, I'm playing with Fred Warner, which would be fucking terrifying.
right?
But yeah, my last up for free agency, I have Tyron Matthew, safety coming from the Kansas City Chiefs. I actually have him coming to my Chicago Bears. Reason that I have this is because in previous years, Tyron Matthew has said he is a massive fan of Eddie Jackson. He said he would love to play with Eddie Jackson. He's a big fan and a big supporter of new Chicago Bears general manager Ryan Poles. I think Tyron Matthew is definitely a little aged, but you know what? He's won a championship. He's got paid. I think he's probably just going to go to a situation where he just wants to have fun. You know, he just kind of wants to ride out into the sunset. And I think for him, coming to Chicago, which again, very similar to Pittsburgh, is a defensive, you know, happy place. You know, defenders love coming to both of those cities because of the history. And for him, he gets to kind of help anchor in the next generation of the Bears defense, which I think is, you know, probably pretty appealing to him. He's not going to be paid super massively, very similar to a Bobby Wagner situation where he's coming in and whatever the Bears do decide to do, it's they're just saying to him like, "Listen, we know we're not going to pay you a whole lot, but we want you to come in here." And I think he's probably going to be willing to not take like a a hometown discount, but a kind of like a friend discount, I would say. But yeah, that's who I have him going to, my Chicago Bears.
Yeah, that seems like a good fit for him, I think. I didn't really see any other teams that Tyron Matthew I thought was for sure going to be going to. And you know, after that, like I find it funny, and I have a feeling it's for the same reason. Neither one of us gave any love to the Indianapolis Colts, who have the most cap space available, I do believe.
Yeah,
But
I would need
really,
to take a look at that, but they do have a
they do.
massive amount of cap space.
Yeah, they've got almost 70 million. But the problem is, for me, I don't feel like I know what they really need, you know. And we'll be talking about them with the trades that have been made this week as well coming up, and why I think we don't really know what their identity is and what it is that they want to do going forward. It's so hard to figure out what the Colts are doing.
Yeah, it really is, and I think this is the perfect segue to move into some of the trades that have happened this week. And speaking of the Colts, let's talk about that Carson Wentz trade. So, like, obviously, Carson Wentz, the Indianapolis Colts trade Carson Wentz to the Washington Commanders for a third round pick this year and a third round pick next year, with potentially it turning into a second round pick with certain standards met.
Yeah, which I assume are probably if they make the playoffs.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, if Washington makes the playoffs, then I assume that third turns into a second.
yep.
Yeah.
I, you know, for me, I look at this deal and go, it is really, really difficult to say who won this trade. Because obviously, if you're the Colts, you're like, we got Carson Wentz off of our books. We don't have him as our quarterback anymore, which is great because let's be honest, he wasn't amazing for the team. And we don't have that massive cap hit. But at the same point, I also look at them and go, yeah, you got 2/3 for him and a potential second round pick. But you also paid a first round pick for this year and a second round pick for next year to acquire him, and you only had him there for a year. I just look at that. I look at Indianapolis. It still shocks me to this day that they would go out and try to trade for him. But it's even more shocking to me that they wouldn't try to keep him and let him compete with someone and, really try to salvage that. Because 1 year to me on a roster, if you're a quarterback, you have to learn a whole new scheme, which Carson Wentz did. He had to learn timing and routes with new receivers and tight ends and get comfortable with everyone. And plus, he just had to get comfortable with the team, the rest of the team in general. And most of the time, when you talk to quarterbacks who move teams, they always say that their second year is way more productive than their first year because they have that chemistry, they have that built time together, they feel more comfortable. And to me, yeah, it's a win for the Colts for moving on from him and moving on from that contract, but it's also a loss because of what they gave up the year prior.
Right? They've been just in limbo ever since Andrew Luck retired out of the blue on them.
Yeah.
They just haven't been able to figure out exactly what it is they're doing at that quarterback position. And yeah, Carson Wentz keeps getting the short end of the stick. Everywhere he goes, they give him a little sampler chance, and then they're like, "Nah, go away."
Yeah, and I understand why Philadelphia decided to move on from him. Like, they gave him a massive, massive contract, and they were like, "Oh wait, you're not good." And then they drafted Jalen Hurts, and they're like, "This guy's better. Go away. We don't want you anymore. We've dealt with you for many years."
Even the Eagles, I feel like he's just getting into bad organizations, because the Eagles, they drafted Jalen Hurts and went, "Oh, you're better," but then turned around and went, "Oh, you're not the guy we want, though." And it's like, you make up your minds,
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good landing spot for Wentz. Like, we talk about whether the Colts won that or whether the Commanders won that. I think Carson Wentz won, because he's going to a team now that, needed a quarterback, is going to be looking to build around that team. They're trying to form a new identity with a new team name and everything. I think that'll be a good spot for him. And if he can perform well, he should be able to parlay that into a big contract again. Maybe not with Washington, but with another team going forward.
Yeah, for me, it might be a win for Carson Wentz, but I also look at it from the Commanders' perspective and go, why would you give up a third and a third next year that could possibly be a second round pick? Like last year, when there was a lot of the Carson Wentz talk coming from Philadelphia, unfortunately for my Bears, they were in conversations, which all turned out to be false. Thank Christ. But there was talks that, the Bears were willing to send a first round pick for him, and I'm like, guys, like, I wouldn't send a fifth round pick for Carson Wentz. Like, he's injury prone. The last 2 years that he wasn't playing injured, he was one of the worst statistical quarterbacks on the field. And I look at Washington and I go, okay, they have Taylor Heineke on their roster currently. Is Carson Wentz really an upgrade over Taylor Heineke? Because I genuinely don't think he is. I look at that, and when I look at the Commanders' perspective on this, and I'm a fan of the Commanders. For instance, if I put myself in Josh's shoes as a Washington Commanders fan, I look at this and I go, Carson Wentz being traded, he's not putting butts in seats. I'm not looking at the team going, "Oh yes, I can't wait to go to the Commanders game. I get to see Carson Wentz as a starting quarterback." I'm not paying to go see Carson Wentz play. He's not going to do jersey sales, so he from a financial standpoint, he's not going to be adding anything. And then from the football perspective, I genuinely believe Taylor Heineke is going to beat him out in training camp. Like, I think you're going to see both of these guys play throughout the year. And I think you're probably going to see Heineke have a better overall record than, for instance, Wentz, because, you know, obviously Heineke has that experience with his weapons around him. You know, he's shown that, again, he's not the best quarterback, but he's serviceable. To me, I don't understand the move by the Commanders. If they were, obviously, they called every single team for a quarterback. They lost out on Aaron Rodgers because he decided to come back to Green Bay, which is something we'll talk about. They lost out on Russell Wilson, which is, again, something we'll talk about later. But, you know, you could still look at the Vegas Raiders and talk about Derek Carr, or potentially even this. You could talk about getting, you know, Deshaun Watson, you know, who had just cleared all of his legal charges. Like, you could go after that. There just seems to be so many different avenues. Jimmy Garoppolo, hell, even Ryan Tannehill, like, that are upgrades that, if you're gonna give up picks, that I would do. But to me, it is an absolutely baffling decision by the Washington Commanders to send a third and a possible second round pick next year for a guy that isn't an upgrade for their team.
See, and I disagree. I think he is an upgrade over Taylor Heineke. And I know Josh will hate me for saying it. I think Heineke only did as well as he did this year because he was new. He was fresh. Like, he's an older guy. He was playing his first year. He managed to pull out a few wins for Washington, but I think Carson Wentz can get more wins for them. And for what they're paying, if you look at what Indianapolis paid for him just last year, they're getting a hell of a deal.
They are.
And he's got 3 years left on his contract, and he's going to be going down in the amount of cap hit that it is over the next two. This year he's still getting, I think, 28, but then it's 26 and 27 the following 2 years. And as that contract shortens, I think his trade value goes up. And so I think what we see is, yeah, he's going to compete with Taylor Heineke for that starting job, and I think he wins it. But I also think Washington is still going to draft their quarterback of the future. And so then you bring in that quarterback of the future, you have him as your third string behind those two guys. Whichever one of the, if there's injuries throughout the season, maybe you ship Taylor Heineke out and that rookie becomes your second string. And then after this season, you look at it and you see, okay, what did Carson Wentz do for us? Is he good enough that we want to keep him around for the following 2 years of his contract? If he is, then that's just more grooming time for this young guy. And if not, then you start looking at trade partners next year, and maybe you are able to get a couple of second round picks or even a first round pick for him again if there's teams that are hard up enough for a quarterback next year. I think in the long run, this will be a good trade for Washington because Carson Wentz trade value, I think, is only going to go up from 2 third-round picks or even a third and a second. I think they'll be able to get more for him next year during the offseason or even the following year when he's going into the last year of his contract. That's when I think Wentz will be a moneymaker for Washington because they'll be able to flip him, probably get something good, like right at a trade deadline for a team that's just on the edge of the playoffs and had a bad quarterback injury.
You and I are definitely gonna disagree on this one, but yeah, you're in favor of it. I'm against it. We both gotta enjoy it. But
well, I look at it. Heineke is a 6 to 7 win player. That's what he's gonna get you. Him. The team around him might be able to win an extra 2 or 3 games, but then you're still fighting for a wild card spot at that point. And while Wentz is a gamble, admittedly, like he could be a 4-win player, but he's also shown he could be a 13-win player. And so that's a big swing gamble, I think, that they're taking on him, and I think it's a smart move for a team that is trying to rebrand themselves. And that is the only reason I am in favor of that trade for Washington.
Yeah.
There were other guys, granted, they could have gotten others, but I think when they tried to sell the farm for Russell Wilson and had the phone hung up on them, You know, they offer 2 firsts and Chase Young, as well as some later picks as well, and you're not getting Russell Wilson for that. That is the point, I think, where they went, okay, we need to shift focus. We're not going to get one of these top guys. We need to go for a second-tier guy that we can pay less for, and hopefully develop into more trade value later.
Yeah. So going back to your conversation of where you said Heineke you believe is like a 6 to 7 win player, and which team do you think was a better overall rounded team last year? Did you think it was the Colts or did you think it was the Commanders?
It was the Colts.
Yeah. And Heineke was able to win almost the same amount of games on a worse team. Granted, they were in a shittier division, but you know, you look at Carson Wentz and go, this guy had I think a capable playoff team. You might win a wild card game, go into the divisional round, see what's happening. And they got bounced when it came important, and it really fell onto Carson Wentz's shoulders. You look back at 2 years ago when you had the Buccaneers versus the football team during that playoff game, and this is when Taylor Heineke really kind of popped up on the scene for all of us, and Heineke almost beat Brady against the Buccaneers. To me, I just look at Heineke as the better option, just because he was able to do more with less. Because, Heineke doesn't have a guy like JT. He doesn't have the offensive line in front of him. Granted, he does have, Terry McLaurin, which, he's a top 15 wide receiver, no doubt about it. I think that, but, yeah, I genuinely think that Heineke is still the better option.
Well, we'll find out come training camp, because there is the possibility of bringing in someone like Wentz. It motivates Heineke to be better, because
Exactly.
that's just it. Either one of these quarterbacks, if they want to win that division and they want to be able to make a deep playoff run, they both have to be better.
Yes.
You know, as they stand right now, either one of those quarterbacks are not good enough to win a Super Bowl for their team. And so
I don't think either of them are good enough to win a playoff game for their team.
Right? I mean, maybe if they're playing the Bears.
Oh, those are fighting words right there.
Right?
Oh. But yeah, so moving on, before we get into the big trade, Aaron Rodgers decides to stay in Green Bay, which I think comes as a shock to some, not a shock to others. What was your initial thoughts when you saw Aaron Rodgers decided to stay in Green Bay?
I was surprised. I really thought he was done with that organization. But then I started looking at how the dominoes could fall from that, and it started making me a little bit happy. Because with Aaron Rodgers staying there, and I believe it was a 4-year deal he signed. Is that correct?
There was initially a post that came out that said Aaron Rodgers is signing a 4-year, $200 million contract, but it was very quickly debunked by Aaron Rodgers himself, where he said the deals of the contract that came out are false, and we have just been kind of waiting on a deal, like all the details of this deal, to see what has happened. So we don't know the full extent of the Aaron Rodgers contract yet.
Okay. Now, yeah, and I mean, looking online, that's still all I'm seeing is 4 years, $200 million.
Yeah, but Aaron Rodgers come out and debunk that.
Fair enough. Well, either way, let's roll with that. If it is a 4-year contract, that means that the Green Bay Packers are done with Jordan Love. And my Pittsburgh Steelers need a quarterback. And Jordan Love, when he was drafted by the Packers, they were tabbing him to be the next Aaron Rodgers. And everybody was talking, oh, maybe Pittsburgh goes out and trades for Aaron Rodgers and gets him in the peak of it at the end of his career here. And so now I'm looking at it going, Green Bay is going to move on from Jordan Love. Let's work out a trade with Green Bay still. Let's bring Jordan Love to Pittsburgh instead. So I was surprised Aaron Rodgers stayed there, but I'm pleasantly surprised, especially if we're able to make that trade now.
I hear you. I need to see the details of that contract first.
Yes.
If we do go off of the 4 years, $200 million deal, they have to move on from Jordan Love, because you can't be looking at Jordan Love. Like, how do you look at Jordan Love and go, listen, like, after those 4 years, you're the guy, we promise. Like, Jordan
Yeah,
Love's
he's
gonna look
already
at,
waited, what, 3 years?
yeah, like, going into this season, this will be his 3rd year,
Yeah.
and you know, Aaron Rodgers technically waited 3 years, yes, before playing in his 4th, but it's still one of those things you look at it and go, Jordan Love sees, like, if it's really a 4-year, $200 million deal, get me the fuck out of here. I was a first round pick by you
Yep.
guys. Like, you guys not only traded up to draft, or like, you not only drafted me, you traded up to draft me. And
Well, exactly. Like his rookie contract is going to expire under this new Aaron Rodgers deal, assuming it's the 4 year, which means they're going to have to tender him a qualifying offer and hope another team doesn't sign him anyway. Like I think it's silly for them to keep him if it's that long of a contract. Honestly, if it's any more than a 1 year contract, I think they need to move on from Jordan Love at that point.
I agree with you on that one. From what it sounds like from Aaron Rodgers' comments about the whole contract situation, he says it's cap friendly to the team. And, from what I've been hearing and listening to around the league, it kind of sounds like there is the distinct possibility that we could be seeing very similar to what happened last year with Aaron Rodgers, of where it's a 1 year big deal type situation, and then at the end of the year, it's kind of like, all right, we'll kind of see and reevaluate at the end of it.
See,
That's
the problem is those 1 year deals, it's hard to make those cap friendly when you got a guy like Aaron Rodgers. A
that's
4 year
true.
deal, you can load that with bonuses to get up to that 200 million mark, and maybe his actual salary is only sitting around that 23 to 27 million range.
Yeah.
And so his salary is lower, but he's still making more than any other quarterback because of those bonuses. And we all know he's going to hit those touchdown targets, those passing yard targets, those no interception targets.
Yeah.
And so I think that's him betting on himself going, yeah, okay, let's write it in as bonuses because those aren't going to affect your salary cap, and then we can bring in other guys.
Oh, for sure. I hear you. I agree. I do like the idea that if, it is a long-term deal, Pittsburgh might be trying to bring in Jordan Love. I was always still questioning with Jordan Love when they drafted him, going like, I don't believe he's a first round talent. My comments for Jordan Love coming out was his ceiling is Patrick Mahomes, but his floor is fucking horrendous. Like,
Yeah.
when I'm looking at him, I look at him very similarly to the way that I look at Malik Willis this year, in the terms of, if he can get to his ceiling, he could be a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous quarterback. But the fact that he has to climb a very large ladder to get there is concerning. And it's a lot easier for him to get, a couple steps up that ladder and then to completely fall backwards and hit the floor.
Yeah, but I mean that could be said for most quarterbacks really coming out of college. There's very few that are sure things, and there's a lot of them that when they first come out, you even look at, we've discussed Patrick Mahomes. When he first came out of college, he was not looking like Patrick Mahomes that we see today.
No.
And Jordan Love, there's a very small test sample that we can pull from at this point. He hasn't had a lot of field time. He played a few games, I believe, in his rookie year due to Aaron Rodgers being out with an injury.
He didn't play a single game in his rookie year. He didn't even
He
dress.
didn't? Okay. Well, and then last year, he only played, that one game when Aaron Rodgers went, oops, I guess I didn't get vaccinated. Sorry.
No, it was literally, he played 2 games this year. It was the first game of the season when the Packers were getting so utterly blown out in the first game of the season that, they were just like, we're losing. We might as well see what Jordan Love looks like in a game. And then again, that situation with the vaccinations.
Yeah. But
yeah.
I mean, even that first game, like you can't really get a true feel guy out already, and so the players have all but given up. It's like all these guys aren't going to be giving it their all for Jordan Love at that point. And so you don't really get a good feel. Like, I think with this move by Green Bay, that launches Jordan Love to the top of the best options list for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're going to get him for less than you'd be able to get a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo in trade value, I believe. And there's, I think, more reward to less risk bringing him in.
I hear you. And you know what? He is still young. And if you get him developed properly, he could still be a good quarterback. But yeah.
Even if he doesn't quite develop, you bring him in, you've still got him on that rookie contract. So then you can do exactly what Pittsburgh has done with Dwayne Haskins this year, and you tender him that RFA, and then if another team does come in and scoop him, you get a draft pick out of it.
Yeah, I hear you. I do.
You know? So I think it's going to be similar to what Pittsburgh did to get Dwayne Haskins last year.
It could be a very, very interesting conversation to be had.
Well,
sure.
They've talked. Their plan is to go into training camp with 4 quarterbacks. Dwayne Haskins, Mason Rudolph, and 2 other guys. Yep. Hopefully one they draft, and one other that they either sign in free agency or that they can get through a trade. I think Jordan Love needs to be that guy now.
Very interesting. Obviously, pending what the contract situation looks like. Because, again, if it's that 4-year, $200 million deal, I think the Steelers come in there and, like, we'll give you a 4th. And the Packers are probably going to be like, well, like, our hands are tied here. Like, we can't really be like, no, we demand a first-round pick. Because I think if, for instance, I'm the GM for the Steelers and I hear that, no, we're only giving away Jordan Love for 1 or multiple first-round picks. If I'm the Steelers, I go, click.
Oh, yeah, 100%. You're not getting 2 first-round picks. But I would send them a 4th next year and Chase Claypool. Because they're going to need wide receiver help in Green Bay as well, because I don't think they're going to be able to afford Devontae Adams as much as they would love to be able to keep him and Rodgers together. They would have to do some pretty fancy work on their books in order to keep both of them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting seeing what's going to happen here moving forward. But
it is.
Yeah,
but like I said, that was one that made me very excited when they decided to re-sign him instead of move on from him, because I was like, oh, that opens the door for Pittsburgh on another quarterback.
That it does. Next trade, again, we are kind of pushing back that massive trade here, but this came a day after the trade we will talk about. But it is my Chicago Bears sending Khalil Mack to the LA Chargers for a 2nd-round pick this year and a 6th-round pick next year. I know my thoughts on it, but Sterling, I want to hear your thoughts when you initially saw it.
When I initially saw it, I wasn't too sure, but after talking with you a little bit, I looked into it, and this is probably one of the best all-around trades we've seen so far. It's a win-win for both teams. Like the Chicago Bears get Khalil Mack off the books. He's a big contract, and they bring in some more draft capital, which they desperately needed for a new GM. That gives them second-round pick this year. So I think that was a great move by the Bears. And man, the Chargers, that defense now, that I think it now brings them up to the point where they are now on par with Kansas City. And so that is going to be just such an epic battle to watch next year for that division. It's going to be KC and LA just battling it out for that first spot. And I mean, I feel for the other quarterbacks in that division, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, and he who shall not be named until a little bit later. They're all going to be running for their lives from Bosa and Mack. You got 2 big guys that are just going to be looking to get after the quarterback. I believe between the 2 of them, they've both averaged something like 12 strip sacks over the last couple of years, like each. So,
Yeah,
I mean, you combine that. Exactly. Like, you protect that football quarterbacks, because you're going to be getting hit hard and often.
Yeah, when I initially saw it and I saw what the return was, I was like, fucking really? Only a 2nd and a 5th-round pick or a 6th-round pick? But I sat back, and after I saw a little bit more of the details, the Chargers, they are completely taking the entire contract on from Khalil Mack, which I think is important, because for the Bears, what this signifies for them is Ryan Poles comes in and goes, this team was not good last year. I don't give a shit about, the fan favorites of this, that, and the other thing. Khalil Mack didn't play last year. He played 6, 7 games
Yeah.
and wasn't super productive in that time.
Well, he was still almost a sack a game player, though.
He was for sure, but he was getting outperformed by Robert Quinn, and not only outperformed, easily outperformed. And by the time the season ended, when Khalil Mack went on IR, I was kind of sitting back going like, shit, like what is this team truly going to look like? I didn't miss him at all. Did not miss him one single bit, because Robert Quinn came out there and was like, I'm just going to casually break the sack record for the Bears this year. Just casually do it. Like whatever, it's fine. And with Khalil Mack, obviously, love him, miss him, have fun in LA, my friend. I hope I don't ever see you play the Bears, because dear God, I don't want to see that. But he was aging for sure. His contract was ridiculously high for a team that does need to rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we could have gotten a higher draft pick, maybe for instance like a 4th, maybe even potentially a 3rd round pick from the Chargers, to if we kept some of the contract. But at the end of the day, I look at it and I go, you know what? We have a little bit still on our contract for this year, but moving into next year, we get $28 million in cap space. Like the Chicago Bears right now, with the moves that they have made, with cutting, Eddie Goldman and Tariq Cohen. Danny Trevathan hasn't been confirmed to be cut yet, but it sounds pretty much like they are going to cut him, and it's going to be fairly soon. If the Chicago Bears don't make any moves going into 2023, they have $143 million in cap space. Obviously, the Bears need to make moves. They need to bring in people, because you need to have a football team. You need to roster 53 players. But even then, if they don't bring in massive, massive contracts, they could be looking at like $70 million in cap space going into next year, which is insane to think about. And
Yeah.
the fact that we get a second round pick this year, Ryan Poles says he wants to build through the draft. You can't build through the draft if you only have 5 picks. And if you don't have a 1st round pick, that makes it even harder. But to have that second round pick, I'm pretty happy about. And the fact that it's still a top 50 pick.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, that also propels them into the talks and the conversation. We were both pretty convinced that Cincinnati Bengals were going to be the front runners for a lot of those offensive tackles and like offensive linemen. But that extra cap space makes that a possibility for Chicago to bring in some extra protection for Justin Fields, which I think would be a very good idea. It would limit the amount of times he has to break outside that pocket. Yep. And so I think we could see them making some moves on guys like Brandon Sheriff, and at least being in the conversation if they don't end up being the guy that ends up landing him.
I think they're going to be in conversation with Teron Armstead. Yeah. I don't think as much for Brandon Sheriff, but because Ryan Poles, he has been fairly adamant. I want to see, obviously, after this first offseason, he says he wants to be a phase 2 and a phase 3 guy in free agency. He doesn't really want to pay or play too much in phase 1, just simply because no matter what in free agency, you are always going to be overpaying for a guy. Mm-hmm. That's just the simple way of free agency. You are always going to be overpaying, no matter what. And so it's interesting to see. I don't think he's really going to be in that top tier, but we'll see. Yeah, moving on. Obviously, we've been teasing it for so long here at this point. We got to talk about the Seattle Seahawks sending star quarterback Russell Wilson to the Denver Donkey Broncos. we honestly need like a pop-up thing that we just hit a button and a donkey pops up every time we talk about the Broncos, just of
Right?
how much we make fun of them.
I'm just thinking the Broncos logo with like donkey from Shrek superimposed over it. I think that's a pretty suitable one.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, obviously with this trade here, the Denver Broncos send a first round pick this year and next year, a second round pick this year and next year. They send quarterback Drew Lock, tight end Noah Fant, and then defensive tackle Shelby Harris. And I'm pretty sure they also send a fifth round pick, and
Yep.
they receive Russell Wilson, and I think it's a sixth round pick that Seattle is
Fourth,
sending,
I believe.
fourth round pick,
Yeah.
and they get Russell Wilson. They are
Right.
sending a fair amount of players back to the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, sending back Noah Fant, they preferred the other tight end that they had. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head right now, but they weren't really utilizing Noah Fant to the full extreme that they could have. But yeah, to send away Drew Lock, who if you're gonna trade for a guy like Russell Wilson, you might as well send a guy like Drew Lock. Is not gonna be your starting quarterback. Sending two first round picks, big time deal. Sending two second round picks, that's also big. I think people do forget, however, that the Broncos did have two second round picks this year. They still have a second round pick this year, which is going to be big for them for sure. But that was an absolutely huge deal. I remember sitting in class, scrolling through Twitter, listening to my professor, talk about, I think it was like court case stuff. And I see this pop up and I'm like, holy fucking shit. And I just look over at my buddy and I tap him on the shoulder and I'm like, read. And he just looked at me and his jaw dropped as well because, after Aaron Rodgers, we all assumed that, if Aaron Rodgers or if the Broncos were going to trade for someone, it was going to be Aaron Rodgers. And I didn't think we all thought that Russell Wilson was going to be that guy.
Especially after they hung up the phone on Washington last week, offering 2 firsts and Chase Young.
Yeah, with multiple other picks later in the draft.
Right? Like, I really thought at that point, okay, Russell Wilson is staying right where he is. They're not going to let him go for anything.
Well, and the fact that Pete Carroll said at the Combine, literally 2 days before the trade, goes, Russell Wilson is staying as a Seahawk. And you can't really say anything other than the Broncos got a hell of a deal out of this. I think it's worth it.
I mean, they definitely propelled themselves from the 4th best team in that division to the 3rd best team in that division.
and
let's be real, they still got the Chargers and the Chiefs there. Like, Russell Wilson is still the 3rd best quarterback in that division.
I was just gonna say that just because the Broncos did trade for Russell Wilson, they still have the 3rd best quarterback in the division, which is insane to think about. Because normally you don't say Russell Wilson is the 3rd best in any category. He was definitely the best quarterback in his previous division.
Well, I mean, 6 to 8 years ago, Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in this division. Even up against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert of today, he is the best in his prime. But he's past that point. We've seen some drop off from him. Granted, the Seahawks have not put a good team around him, but at this point, free agency and the draft are going to determine whether the Broncos can put a good team around him too. Like, they have to have A+ grade draft this year. They have to get a big name guy, another wide receiver out of this free agency class as well. And then they need to build that defense. They need to find a way to stop the guys like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Justin Herbert. I still think Juju Smith-Schuster ends up going to the Chargers as well. Like, there's going to be a lot of things the Broncos have to do if they seriously want to be able to compete with those 2 other teams.
I agree.
This was a great first step, and it probably one of the best moves they've made since they traded for Peyton Manning.
Sign
And
Peyton
so
Manning.
it's sign Peyton Manning. Yeah. But I mean, so they're definitely trending in the right direction, but they've got to do everything right this offseason if they really want to have a shot at being in discussions for playoffs and a Super Bowl next year.
I agree with you. Looking at this AFC West division, this might be the first time we will ever see 4 teams from one division all make the playoffs. And normally when you say that, you're just like, oh, there's a really good division. Like, oh, you have 3 teams usually be really, really good, and you're like, yeah, these 3 teams are gonna make the playoffs. And then there's that like one team where you're like, it's okay, buddy, you can play in the best division too, you know.
Yeah.
It was kind of like looking at a couple years ago when the Steelers, Browns, and Ravens all went to the playoffs, and everyone was looking at the Bengals going, "It's okay, buddy. You can play in the best division too." But now you really have a situation of all 4 of these teams can make the playoffs.
Yep.
Because I think everyone always gets lost in the sauce with looking at Kansas City and now with Justin Herbert and the Chargers going, these 2 kids are fucking great quarterbacks. And last year, I think everyone kind of forgot that the Raiders, even with how dysfunctional they were last year, because they were a dumpster fire with how dysfunctional that organization was, they still made the playoffs and they were a good team. They
Yep.
came on strong, and not only that, they got a better coach in Josh McDaniels, and if he keeps Derek Carr, he should elevate Carr to a whole new level that we have never seen from Carr, because Derek Carr has never had an offensive guru ever as good. I think Josh McDaniels is one of the brightest offensive minds in football, and the fact that you can add him to a top 15 talent quarterback in Derek Carr, that is huge. Utterly, utterly huge. I think the Raiders need to work on their defense for sure, and that's where they're really going to struggle. But the fact that, you could look at all of these teams and go, fuck, every single one of these teams might win 10 games. And
Right? That's
the
what I
only
was thinking.
losses that come are within the division against each other, which is just insane to think about. And,
It's like the polar opposite of that NFC East division where there's years that you go through that division and you're like, wow, we could have a 6-win team making the playoffs from this shitty division.
Exactly. The fact that we could see, like, the fact that we could still see the Broncos not make the playoffs next year after trading, 2 first rounds, 2 second round picks, a buttload of players for Russell Wilson, and the fact that they could still potentially miss the playoffs, which is how competitive that division it is insane to think about.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm not a fan in that division because that is just going to be a horrible roller coaster ride the whole season, no matter which one of those teams you cheer for. Because we even saw it this year. The Chiefs were really falling off at the start of the year. They turned it on midway through and became that Chiefs team that we were familiar with. But we could see that again. Anything could happen in that division. It's going to be intense.
Yeah. So for me, when I initially saw this, I sat back and thought to myself, who is the winner of this trade and who is the loser? And I think the only real way we can determine a winner and loser for this trade is just simply, we need to look at what the Broncos do in the next 2 years. The Broncos need to at least make an AFC championship game to consider this move as viable. And if they don't make the AFC championship game in 2 years, a lot of people are getting fired.
And I think not just an AFC championship game, but a home field AFC championship game. They need to be able to win their division and get some ticket revenue from having home field games during the playoffs in order for this to be worth it.
I 100% agree with you. And to really look at that and to say, oh, the Broncos need to get home field advantage in an AFC championship game, you just look at that and you go, that is a task, because again, there was 3 teams last year in the AFC who were in the AFC divisional games that were going into the championship games that we all looked at and went, these are some pretty good fucking teams here. And there's 3 teams, obviously the Kansas City Chiefs, you can never count them out with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid running that team. The Buffalo Bills, who both years in a row have just fallen flat to the Kansas City Chiefs. And as much as you hate it, and I know you hate it, the Cincinnati Bengals are only going to get better, and they're only going to get harder. And
well, now the point I was going to make is, even outside of that division, you look at the other divisions in the AFC, and as you said, you've got the Buffalo Bills, with Josh Allen. You've got the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow. You've got the Tennessee Titans, who still have Derrick Henry. Like, they're still going to be a top team. And then you have this wild card of the Indianapolis Colts with $70 million available to them that they could go out and turn their team into another contender. Like, the AFC next year is going to be outrageous. And, I mean, fanboy as I am, I'm hopeful that the Steelers can turn around their run defense. And if they do that, all of a sudden that propels them right back into the talks. I know we're going to be without Ben Roethlisberger, but I have confidence in our offense that we can get it moving with just about anybody we bring in. And then if we can get that defense playing top 3 in the league like we always do, then all of a sudden they're in it as well. Like, it's going to be outrageous watching the AFC next year.
I'm happy I'm in the NFC because typically for me, all I've had to deal with is fucking Aaron Rodgers. And that is a depressing thing, and I still have to deal with his jackass going into the future.
4 more years.
No, shut up. We're not talking about a presidential term here.
And yeah, the chat is, they pointed out, like, we haven't even mentioned that, the Baltimore Ravens.
Yep.
Like Lamar Jackson, it depends how he comes back from that ankle injury. If he can't be as mobile as he once was, that becomes a totally different look team. But we can't count them out. They've got a lot of youth, a lot of speed. They got that smash mouth defense still that they always build to go up against Pittsburgh. And it's just unbelievable the amount of talent that we now have on so many of these AFC teams. Of course, we've got the typical bottom feeders of the New York Jets and probably the Houston Texans.
Jacksonville Jaguars, depending.
Depending. I mean, I still think they're going to have a breakout year as well. Like, that's a team, again, we haven't talked about. They could come out of nowhere and end up being a 10 or 11 win team all of a sudden. They've got a much better coach now, like leaps and bounds better, another first overall pick. And as we discussed earlier with the free agents, I have a couple of free agents signings likely happening in Jacksonville just to really solidify their leadership core.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see, but yeah, that AFC is going to be just insanely fun to watch. It is going to be so much fun to watch. So moving on from the Russell Wilson trade, obviously this is a trade that happened today, only a handful of minutes before the podcast went live, and that is the Dallas Cowboys are trading star wide receiver Amari Cooper to the Cleveland Browns for a 5th round pick, and the 2 teams will be swapping 6th round picks this year. Thoughts on that?
Wins all the way around. I mean, Dallas was looking to cut Amari Cooper anyway, so they managed to turn that instead into a 5th and a 6th round pick, which is a good thing. They moved that cap off the books because, as we discussed, they are in cap hell. They've got to make a lot of moves to get under that cap. And then on the other side of that, this is an excellent wide receiver pickup for Cleveland because, as we saw last year, it was too much personality in the locker room with Odell Beckham Jr. And OBJ showed that he is still a great receiver when he went to LA. And so it wasn't a talent issue, it was a character issue in Cleveland. Yeah. So bringing in a guy like Amari Cooper, who's not going to be on the sidelines bitching and moaning because he's not getting the targets he wants, he's going to go out there and he's going to quietly take the targets that are given to him, and he's going to make that team so much better. Because there's not going to be that drama on the sideline. They're going to be able to move the ball around, use the tight end talent, use the second and third wide receiver talent they have, and there's not going to be a guy on the sideline barking at the coach going, "Where's the ball? I want the ball. Give me the ball."
Yeah,
And so this is going to be really good. And not only that, but I am hearing rumors that Cleveland is throwing their hat in this Deshaun Watson sweepstakes that's going on. They're looking at possibly bringing him in there as well. And so Amari Cooper, Deshaun Watson, all of a sudden Cleveland is now a top tier team in the AFC as well.
Exactly. I don't know how viable that Deshaun Watson rumor is for Cleveland. I think they're probably on the lower end of that trade talk there. But one of the rumors that I am hearing is that Jarvis Landry is now seeking a trade, and the Browns have given him permission to seek a trade, which obviously I think if, Jarvis Landry wants to be moved on from, I think the Browns should decide to move on from him, because he is kind of one of those big personality guys similar to an OBJ. He's an OBJ light, kind of what I call him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be interesting to see that.
That's disappointing for the Browns, because that sort of hinders this trade that they've made, because I mean, I looked at that going, okay, Landry and Cooper are going to fight for that first string wide receiver. And it just, whichever one wins, they're just going to be on opposite sides of the field. And whichever one's open is going to get the ball. Like that's a great situation for Jarvis Landry, in my opinion. Like, I think him moving out of there, I don't think that's a good move for him.
We will see what happens. Obviously, I guess I kind of look at it from Jarvis Landry's perspective, is that he sees the Browns going after what is considered by most a number one wide receiver for most teams. And Jarvis Landry goes like, why are you trading for this guy? You have me. Go out and use your first round pick on a wide receiver if you want another wide receiver. Why should I have to be kind of pigeonholed, to this awkward and shitty situation, to be honest? And like, I understand it from Jarvis Landry's perspective. He doesn't want to be second fiddle.
No.
And if Amari Cooper comes in, to be honest, he's probably going to end up being second fiddle, because obviously the Browns traded for him. The Browns traded for Jarvis Landry years ago.
And paid a lot more for Jarvis Landry too.
That they did.
I don't, like, myself looking at it, like, I think Jarvis Landry's being silly, because you look at that and you go, well, I mean, my team didn't have to sell very much to get another big name guy who's going to take attention away from me. If I'm the number one guy on this team and we don't have a guy like Amari Cooper, I'm getting double teamed every play. Now with Amari Cooper, it's like, okay, now I got single coverage. I'm going to be able to beat single coverage 90% of the time because I'm Jarvis Landry. Instead, he's going to take a trade to a team where he's going to be the number one guy, and there's going to be a significant drop off on that depth chart to number two, which means he's going right back into a double cover situation, and he's just diminishing his own value.
Yeah, I hear you. It's interesting to see with Landry. I understand why he wants to move on, but again, like what you're saying, if I was Landry in this situation, you'd be like, yeah, sure, why not have Amari Cooper on the opposite side taking pressure off of me?
On the other side of it, like, I don't blame him. I want to be out of Cleveland too. Yeah. I wouldn't want to wear that shitty, ugly brown uniform that looks like I've been rolling in shit all day.
It sounds like a little, Steelers bias there.
No, that's completely objective observation. I'm not being biased.
No, not at all. Not by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, so a lot of big moves happened this week. Obviously, we saw the Mac, we saw the Wentz, we saw the Cooper today, and we saw the Russell Wilson. It feels like to me this is kind of something that we don't really see a whole lot of in the NFL, which is big players getting moved all within a relatively short time. Obviously, we do see trades in the early part of the offseason, but I can't remember a time where we saw this many either high-profile guys or this much volume being moved this quickly. It kind of feels almost like a, NBA or NHL, trade deadline day, where we're just seeing move. And it doesn't really feel like the NFL. Like, I can't remember a time when this much happened all within the span of 1 week.
Like, it feels like an expansion year. You know, like teams trying to get guys off the books because they're not going to be able to protect them anyway. You know, that's what it feels like to me. But, you know, we saw a lot of teams up against the cap this year. I think that's a big part of the reason we're seeing this shuffle happening. And a lot of what I've seen moving, it's guys who were tier 1 players 5 years ago. You know, and we're starting to get to that point where a lot of them are dropping off. And I think that's why we're seeing so much more this year. It's been a weird 2 years as well with the pandemic. You know, there was a lot of teams not making the money they thought they would, you know, not having the success they wanted. I had a feeling we were going to be in for one of these years soon, and this is the year that makes the most sense because the draft class outside of the top 8 to 12 isn't that strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I had a feeling we'd see a lot more of these moves happening. There were some shockers for sure. I didn't think anybody would jump on the Amari Cooper. You know, I didn't think Khalil Mack would be moving. You know, and as I said after that hang up on Washington, I didn't think Russell Wilson would end up going anywhere, but here we are. And then the biggest name throughout the entire regular season, playoffs, and off season in Aaron Rodgers is the one that ends up not going anywhere.
Yeah, the guy that we've been talking about.
He was the guy
so
everyone
much.
was talking about. And he's the one that doesn't end up going anywhere. Like, just so bizarre how that ended up falling out.
Yeah, like how many weeks have we been talking about Aaron Rodgers potentially being moved on from with the Green Bay Packers? And lo and behold, we have one of the most exciting set of like trades that have happened. I'm not going to say ever in the NFL in 1 week's time, but, you know, in recent memory.
Yeah, and we're not done. I mean, the league year technically hasn't started. I believe it's March 15th or something like that before any of these deals can actually be finalized, before the league will sign off on them.
Yep.
And when that happens, that's when the dominoes start to fall. You know, that's when the Jimmy Garoppolos start coming up, and the Jordan Love, and all these other guys that we talked about as second and third tier players that are going to be moved. We still got all that to look forward to. So there's going to be a lot more moves, I think, in the season because of that weaker draft class. I think a lot of teams are looking at next season and going, okay, we aren't going to be starting a lot of our rookies next year. These guys all need more development time because they didn't develop fully in college due to COVID-19. They were not able to get in those practice rooms with each other, and they couldn't develop to the point where they're NFL ready now. And so we're going to see a lot more development going forward, and that's why we're seeing so many trades, I think. And I think we're going to see a lot more all through the summer, probably even through training camp and preseason as well.
Yeah, going back to the draft, I still think this is a very good draft class. I think it's a weaker quarterback draft class, for instance, with the development. I still think it's good, but this is a perfect segue to go into what we're talking about is my, I should say, second mock draft of the year. So, just going to have to do a little bit of fiddling around here and, you know, playing around and getting it correct.
Oh, getting it all set up and ready to go. Yep. Makes sense. But man, I still can't believe Aaron Rodgers re-signed with Green Bay. I hope to God Pittsburgh goes out and tries to get Jordan Love, because I think he's the best one out there, and right away that gives us competition value with Cincinnati. Because I know the chat was talking about the Ravens still being a team, but honestly, they don't worry me much. Yep. You know, that first year with Lamar Jackson, he looked good. Second year, he looked all right. You know, he went uphill a little bit, but it's just been fall off since then. And I don't think the Ravens are really going to be much for that AFC North division to worry about. It's going to be Cincinnati and Pittsburgh for the next few years, because as I always say, Cleveland's a dumpster fire. You could fill that team with superstars, they're still going to find a way to lose.
I have to agree with you. It's very interesting to see what's going to happen there. But yeah, going into the draft class here. So obviously with the NFL draft, we open up the season with a see if I can get this to actually do its thing here. With the number 1 pick, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. And funny enough, I have them selecting edge rusher Aiden Hutchinson's out of Michigan. The reason I have this is the franchise tag of Cam Robinson, their tackle. This is the 2nd year in a row that they've done that, and he's a left tackle. We've been talking for a while now that they'd be going after either a guy like Evan Neal or Iku Awanu from from NC State. If you franchise a left tackle 2 years in a row, I can't see you going after one of these rookie offensive tackles first overall, and especially with how good a guy like Aiden Hutchinson is. To me, I just look at it and go, this is just too much of a do it now type pick. So let me get your thoughts.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, it fits in with what we were discussing earlier with the free agent signings. I really thought they would go for an edge rusher. I know you had discussed about maybe them taking a tackle to protect Trevor Lawrence a little bit more, but that feels more like a next year hole that they try to fill. This year, I think they need to focus wholly on their defense and ensuring that they need to score as few points as possible to win games. Because that division, outside of the Tennessee Titans, is kind of wide open. We don't know what's happening with Deshaun Watson and the Texans. We all assume they're going to move on from him, which means the Texans aren't going to be a concern for anybody. And the Colts, it remains to be seen what they do in free agency. They've got so much cap space. They're going to be
quarterback.
No quarterback. So that's going to be one of those spots where maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo lands or a Derek Carr or who knows. There's so many options out there. They could end up moving up, just like Seattle is probably looking to get one of these rookies. It's hard to tell, and there's so many moving pieces right now.
Yeah.
But I think that's exactly the pick that the Jacksonville Jaguars go for.
Yeah, and to pair Aiden Hutchinson, who is more of a bull rush, I'm going to run through you type of guy. And then to pair him off with a Josh Allen on the other side, who is a finesse. I'm going to move around you. I can still run you over, but I'm going to use my fancy handwork and my speed and agility to get around you to go after the quarterback. That gives them a scary, and I mean scary, 1-2 punch coming off the edge.
That was my thought process with bringing in a guy like Akeem Hicks, is he's then that support guy, and he's mentoring both of these young kids and showing them the tricks that he's learned over the years that both of them are lacking in their games.
Yeah, and it would be huge. But yeah, moving on to the 2nd overall pick with the Detroit Lions, I have them selecting Kayvon Thibodeau, edge rusher out of Oregon. Obviously, throughout the combine, there was a lot of talk around him. Does he really like football? Does he really want to be part of football? You could see throughout the season he was definitely taking some plays off. And I know I could get some comments. Well, why wouldn't they go after like an Evan Neal or Iku Awanu? They drafted a Penei Sewell last year for their tackle situation. He's playing left tackle. There's no reason for them to go after a tackle who is a left tackle, because Evan Neal and Eku Awau is a left. They're both left tackles, and you're not going to move them over to right tackle. And for me, with Thibodeau, he is just too good of a prospect to pass up. And to me, this just also feels like a Lions pick as well. A guy with, maybe a little bit of commitment issues, I would say. But if you get him into that system, and I think he could be really good with the Lions. And obviously you have to go after a guy like Aaron Rodgers. And if Justin Fields can take it to the next level, you have 2 really, really good quarterbacks that you're going to need someone to go after. And this is a guy that could easily be in the double-digit sacks every single year.
Yeah.
So I do not view this as a bad move for the Lions.
No, that's kind of the only move for the Lions, really. It's that or trade down, I think.
I think so. Obviously, there's been talks about a quarterback, but the number 2 overall pick this year. If you're drafting a quarterback, most people are looking at you going, what the fuck are you doing?
Right. Yeah, I can't remember who I was talking to, but somebody said they saw a mock draft where Pittsburgh traded up to the 2nd overall pick so they could take Malik Willis, and I was like, that would be the most boneheaded move that the Pittsburgh Steelers have ever done.
Yeah.
To do that. No team should be taking any of these quarterbacks in the top 3.
I fully agree. And moving over to our 3rd overall pick, we have the Houston Texans, and I have them selecting Iku Awanu, offensive tackle from NC State. I have him being selected over Evan Neal. The reason being is I don't know what is going to be happening in Houston, whether Deshaun Watson's going to be there, whether he's getting traded, all this. And, Lovie Smith is a defensive guy, and a lot of people would be like, oh, how come, you're not taking the safety from Notre Dame? Well, you need to protect whoever you have up front. And when you have a kid this talented, you need to take him. Doesn't matter if you have a quarterback in place. Davis Mills, if he's going to be good, you might as well help him out. This
Yep.
pick just helps out your quarterback situation, whatever happens with it. It also helps out with your run game. It's not super sexy, it's not super flashy, but it is the right pick. I have him selected here over Neal just because of how good he looked at the combine. He put on a show. And you know what? We could still see Awanu be selected 1st overall. I don't think it's going to happen, but to me, this feels like the right move for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, he did great things at the combine for improving his draft stock. So, for a while there, he was sitting around that 5 to 7 range. I think him going at 3 makes sense. The Texans, I don't even think the Texans know what they're doing. So,
Yeah.
we'll see how that goes. But I think that's a good spot for him to land.
Yeah, moving over to 4th overall, we have the New York Jets, and I have them selecting Evan Neal, offensive tackle from Alabama. This is a no-brain pick for me. They need to help out their young quarterback. You know what? Zach Wilson was getting beat up and bruised last year. And if you have a guy of Evan Neal's stature, you're sitting there going, this is a no-brainer. We need to help get him protection. We don't want to see him on the ground and getting hurt. So to me, Evan Neal falls into their laps. They're like, yeah, okay. We have another early on pick. We have another 1st round pick in the top 15. So of course, why wouldn't we take Evan Neal with the pick?
Yeah, makes sense to me. I don't know if the Jets have that much, forethought to actually do that. But yeah, if Evan Neal falls to you at 4, you got to take him. But every mock I've seen has them going after Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. And they've been so high on him all this whole process. I think they've got that tunnel vision. I don't know if they would end up making that move over to Neal.
Yeah, and moving over to 5th overall, speaking of the devil, I have them taking Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. To me, when I truly believe Kyle Hamilton is the best defensive player in this draft, and the fact that he is still sitting here at 5th overall is really, really hard to think. But again, for me, I look at it, you can't choose a safety 1st overall. You can't do it 2nd overall, especially when you have the edge rushers that are there. Those 2 edge rushers are superstars in the making. And the last time we saw a safety get picked this high up, and he went to New York, he just happened to go to the Jets. He was good, but what, he wasn't amazing. Jamal Adams is looked at as one of the better safeties in the NFL, but I don't view him as a top 5 pick. But Kyle Hamilton will work wonders for that Giants organization, and the fact that they could potentially get the best player in this draft at 5 is insane.
Yeah.
Moving over to 6th overall, I have the Carolina Panthers selecting Charles Cross, offensive tackle out of Mississippi State. Charles Cross has been jumping up draft boards. He had a really good combine. You know what? I was really, really impressed watching this kid throughout the year. He is not far away from Leel and Oahu. And, as much as we've been talking about the Panthers need a quarterback, they need a quarterback, I've been hearing a lot of rumors that if they don't trade this first overall pick away for a guy potentially like a Deshaun Watson, they're gonna spend this pick on an offensive tackle to help improve. And again, this is going back to the Houston Texans situation. Is an offensive lineman a sexy pick? Is it, a pick that, people love to watch? No. But is it the right move? Yeah, you better believe it is. You help out your run game. That's going to help Christian McCaffrey out to no ends. Like, that is going to be absolutely huge for him.
Yeah, maybe he could actually play a full season without getting hurt then.
Exactly.
But, I mean, that still leaves them in the position of, do they just re-sign Cam Newton?
Who knows what's going to happen with Carolina. I've just heard that so much that they're going to go after a tackle. That's why I kind of have to lean in that direction. And Cross, to me, is a good value at that pick.
Oh, 100%.
So moving over to the 7th overall pick, we are back again with the New York Giants. And I have them selecting Amani Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati. This kid over the combine truly solidified himself as the number 1 corner in this year's draft class. I truly do believe that. And as much as, it's a little bit of a shock, but the combine, he just looked so good. And the Giants, they get Hamilton and Gardner in that secondary. It's going to it's going to very quickly turn into a no-fly zone.
Yep.
That is going to be...
And then
it's going to be huge for them. And if they do not decide to move on from Bradbury, even better.
Right. And that makes sense with, the possibility of them going after someone like Mitchell Trubisky for their quarterback. So that's a good pick for them. Yeah, get that defense solid again. You gotta stop Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys somehow.
Exactly. So moving over to 8th overall, we have the Atlanta Falcons, and I have them selecting Trayvon Walker, edge rusher / defensive lineman out of Georgia. This kid was unbelievable at the combine. I had him as a top 15 pick going into the combine. But right here, he just shot up my board like no one can believe. Normally, I would have given the Falcons a corner here, but I look at Trayvon Walker and I go, you cannot pass up on him. He is going to be dangerous. He's 270 pounds, and the way that he can move, oh my God. If they dedicate him to being just a true edge rusher, he is going to be scary, and he's going to be a double-digit sack getter every single year for the Falcons.
Well, especially with how much time he's going to spend on the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't expect that one, but yeah, it was good. With the 9th overall pick, we have the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, this came from the Denver Donkey Broncos in the Russell Wilson trade. I have them selecting quarterback Malik Willis out of Liberty, the first quarterback off the board. I do not think they are going to waste any time with this. They're going to go after the guy to potentially, not to potentially replace, but to replace Russell Wilson. This kid has a lot of upside. He is my number 4 quarterback in this year's draft class, but like I said, if you can get this kid up to his true potential, he's going to be special.
Yeah, he's the best quarterback to play in a Pete Carroll style offense. So that makes a lot of sense. And you knew when they made that trade and traded Russell Wilson away for that first pick, you knew they had to go for a quarterback. You're either drafting a quarterback at 9, or you're trading that pick away for another quarterback in the league somewhere.
Exactly. I do think that I've heard some rumors that Seattle might be in the conversation to go after Deshaun Watson.
Mm-hmm.
And
Just flip all those picks right back to Houston.
Yep. And if
Yep.
that's the case, I think Houston would potentially take Malik Willis here. But yeah, I think Seattle, if they stick with this pick, Malik Willis is going to be the first quarterback off the board, and that's where he goes.
Yeah.
With the 10th overall pick and the second pick for the New York Jets, I have them selecting David Ojabo, edge rusher out of Michigan. They got their franchise tackle. Now they go out there and get themselves a franchise edge rusher. He was so good at Michigan. He kind of got outshined by Aiden Hutchinson, but by no means did he get outclassed. He is going to be so good in the NFL. This Nigerian Scotsman he's going to be a problem. He's still learning the position, and the fact that he was able to do what he did at Michigan while still learning how to play football, it's going to be insane to watch this kid when he gets to his peak.
Yeah.
I think this is a very solid move by the New York Jets. Moving over
that's a smart move. You shore up your trenches on both sides of the ball in the top 10 picks.
Yep. Moving over to the Washington Commanders. This is going to come as a shock to some people, but I still have them selecting quarterback Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. I do not trust Carson Wentz. Obviously, you and I went back and forth on this. I do not have faith in Carson Wentz. I think it was a silly, silly move. To me, people are going to be like, well, they just traded a bunch of picks to go up and get Carson Wentz. Well, the Eagles, after trading for Sam Bradford a couple years ago, that same year, they traded up a bunch of picks to go get Carson Wentz. The Chicago Bears signed, Mike Glennon to a big-time deal, traded up to go get Mitchell Trubisky. It is not out of the realm of possibility, because we've seen it in the past couple of years. And hell, just look at the Cardinals a couple of years ago when they ended up selecting Josh Rosen 10th overall, and then the next year they selected Kyler Murray 1st overall. Just because a team moves for a quarterback does not mean they won't end up drafting, and I think this is the right move. We even talked about it. Carson Wentz, you end up drafting a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
You let Kenny Pickett sit for a year, and you let Carson do what he needs to do and get slaughtered. And you let
or build his trade value. That's where we disagreed. I think it's a good move still for Washington, but we did agree earlier, and I said it too. They still have to take a quarterback with that first pick of theirs.
Yep.
And Kenny Pickett, if he's available at 11, you jump on that, because 1 year sitting and learning the game and developing, he is going to come out next year and just be lights out for Washington.
I think so. And one thing I should also say in this mock draft, I do not do trades. I do not try to predict trades. They are too difficult to do. I do not like doing them, so you will not see any trades unless they are trades that have actually happened.
Yeah.
So moving over to 12th overall, we have the Minnesota Vikings selecting Derek Stingley Jr., cornerback out of LSU. It is really, really shocking and hard to see Derek Stingley falling to 12th overall, but just the way the board has been set up, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. And I think the Vikings fall in love with this pick, and they're like, we still have to compete with Aaron Rodgers, and if Justin Fields improves, we have to now deal with that as well. So we need to make sure that we can solidify and make it a lot harder for these guys to throw the ball. And I think this is a phenomenal pickup by them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best possible pick for them in the division they're in. You got to find ways to get your secondary performing at an elite level to stop guys like Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields.
I agree. Moving over 13th overall with the Cleveland Browns, I have them selecting wide receiver Drake London out of USC. Obviously, This came before the news of the Browns trading for Amari Cooper. Even with now Amari Cooper here, and you know, you still have Jarvis Landry on the trade block. If you trade Jarvis Landry away, sure, you get some more momentum throughout that, or you get some more picks with that. But I still think Drake London, he is without a doubt the best wide receiver in this draft class. And pairing Amari Cooper with a young Drake London, doesn't matter who the quarterback is there, that is going to be a hell of a good unit to throw to.
Yeah, 100% agree that that's what Cleveland is going to be looking at as another wide receiver, because I think they will move on from Jarvis Landry. They learned last year when OBJ wanted out and they didn't let him out right away, it crushed their season.
It
And
bit him
so
in the
I think
ass.
they'll move on from him as quickly as they possibly can.
I think so as well. Moving over to 14th overall, I have the Baltimore Ravens selecting Kenyan Green, tackle from Texas A&M. Lamar Jackson is a mobile quarterback. You need to protect him.
Yeah.
They struggled this year on the offensive line. Kenyan Green, he is definitely maybe a little bit of a reach here at this point, but he is still a phenomenal offensive lineman, and I think the Ravens would love to have him.
Yeah, and he's a reach that they got to do at this point, because, I mean, like, really the only other guy that's in there for that first round that would be worth it would be someone like a Tyler Linderbaum, and you don't want to reach that high up for a center.
Yeah, and they need more guys on the edges as opposed to the interior.
Yeah, no, that's a smart pick for Baltimore for sure.
Now, the first of 3 first-round picks for the Philadelphia Eagles, 15th overall, I have them selecting Devin Lloyd, middle linebacker out of Utah. The Philadelphia Eagles, for whatever reason, always seem to neglect, very similarly to the Las Vegas Raiders, the middle linebacker position. When you have 3 first-round picks and you have a guy of Devin Lloyd's playing ability, you take Devin Lloyd with that first pick. You get that situation done. The Eagles do have a pick right after this, but I think Devin Lloyd here at 15 is a massive steal, and this is amazing for the Eagles to pick up.
Yeah. I like Devin Lloyd.
Moving over to the 16th pick, I have them again sticking with defense, and I have them selecting George Karlaftis, edge rusher out of Purdue. Going into, the combine, I would have said he was my 4th edge rusher right after the kid from Michigan. I'm forgetting his name currently at the moment. I'm not even going to try to... Ojabo, thank you. But Trayvon Walker definitely impressed, and the Eagles get themselves a amazing edge rusher. This kid, very similarly to Obawu, he's still learning the position. He is going to be amazing for that defensive front. And obviously with these back-to-back picks, they get amazing defensive players, and they're seriously helping that defense out and making it so that teams are going to struggle to score.
Yep.
With the 17th overall pick, I have the Los Angeles Chargers selecting Tyler Lindenbaum, offensive lineman. Either it's kind of mixed between a center or a guard. He can play both in the NFL. This is just saying to Justin Herbert, we got you Khalil Mack a few days ago. How about we get you Tyler Lindenbaum to make sure that no one hits you up front? We got you a superstar tackle last year. How about we get you a superstar interior lineman this year?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's the smart way for the Chargers to go. They got Khalil Mack. I still think they go out and get a wide receiver in free agency as well. And so working on that O-line is the best possible way to go. Give Justin Herbert more time and give those wide receivers time to get open for him.
Exactly. It's one of those situations where you look at it and go, offensive lineman, not a sexy pick. It's not an exciting pick, but it is a useful pick.
Oh, it's sexy when you've got a superstar quarterback.
Yep. Moving over to the New Orleans Saints, 18th overall, I have them selecting Matt Corral, quarterback out of Ole Miss. The reason I have them selecting Corral is it's time to move on from Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
You need you're 70 million over the cap. The rebuild starts now. And if you can get a guy of Matt Corral as your starting guy, I still think you need to bring in kind of this bridge quarterback. For instance, they could go after a guy like Andy Dalton to let Corral sit behind and
Yep.
develop for a year, get fully healthy. I think this could be a really good move for them in the long run. I think a lot of people would look at this pick and go wide receiver, but if you don't have a quarterback to throw to the wide receiver, what does it fucking matter?
Exactly. Yeah, you got to get that quarterback first.
And with Matt Corral, he has a lot of upside. Now, going back to the Philadelphia Eagles with their third pick in the first round, I have them selecting Jordan Davis, D tackle out of Georgia. I am continuing to help building that defense. Obviously, they got Devin Lloyd for the middle. They got Karlaftis off of the edge. Now they get an absolute freak of nature in Jordan Davis in the middle of their defensive line. Watch out. This Philadelphia Eagles defense with these three guys is going to be fucking terrifying. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I kind of thought that they might go for more of their secondary at that point, try and get one of the cornerbacks that are still available. Just because they got the linebacker, they got the lineman, and go for the secondary with that third one. But it makes sense grabbing a third guy in your front seven.
When I saw that I still had Jordan Davis on the board at this point, I was like, if the Eagles pass up on Jordan Davis at this point with him still on the board, that would be foolish.
Yeah.
Moving over to your Pittsburgh Steelers, 20th overall, I have them selecting Devontae Wyatt, defensive tackle out of Georgia, the guy who was sitting opposite. I think this is a really good pick. It really helps them in the middle of the run game. Obviously, we've talked about multiple times here on this podcast that the Steelers struggled against the run. This guy instantly helps them against the run.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what they go for, especially once Willis, Pickett, and Corral are all off the board already by the time it gets to them. They're either looking at their O-line or their D-line at that point.
Yeah, and at this point, I didn't really see any offensive linemen of value for the Steelers, and I figured this is just too good of a pick to pass up for him.
Right. The only one that might sort of be in there would be Trevor Penning.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Moving over
Or
to
Kenyan Green too. He's still available.
Kenyan Green was selected by the Ravens.
Right. My bad.
Moving over to 21st overall, I have the New England Patriots selecting Nakobe Dean, linebackers. For whatever reason, I wrote down edge, but he's more of a middle linebacker. Ignore the edge. I screwed that up. He is a middle linebacker / weak side linebacker. This is kind of one of those picks where you look at the Patriots and go, they could use a wide receiver. They could use something like this, that, and the other thing. But this is Bill Belichick. He is going to want himself a premier linebacker that can do so much. Nakobe Dean, to me, just feels like a Bill Belichick pick.
Yeah. Yeah, get that defensive guy in there. That is very Bill Belichick.
He shocked us, or he didn't really shock us last year, but he did something very un-Bill Belichick, selecting a quarterback in the first round. Now we get to see kind of more of the Bill Belichick ways. He goes after a premier linebacker in Nakobe Dean.
Well, I mean, he knows what he needs when he needs it, and he was in a position where he needed a new quarterback. And
Yep.
what are the odds, really, of you going out and getting a 6th round quarterback again that's Tom Brady quality. It's a rare thing. So it was smart of him to reach up and grab a quarterback last year.
I agree. I agree. Moving over to the Las Vegas Raiders with the 22nd pick in the draft, I have them selecting Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. The last time they selected a player from Ohio State, he threatened someone with a gun. Hopefully this time, picking an Ohio State player, it works out for him. They need some wide receiver help, obviously, after losing, another wide receiver that they selected in the first round, and he ended up driving 135 miles per hour and killing someone while drunk. They need more help up front for Derek Carr. This is going to be the guy that I believe they pick.
Well, why do you have him there over Chris Olave?
Wilson is more polished, and I think he's better suited in the NFL. I like Chris Olave. You could do either A or B for these guys, but I do think Wilson is the better overall receiver at this point.
Okay. I was just curious, because I know you were high on Olave and hoping he would fall to the Bears, so I wasn't sure if maybe that was just a pick to keep Olave on the board.
Nope. This is simply because I believe Wilson is the better player.
Okay.
I will do a spoiler alert. Olave does not make it to my Chicago Bears.
Okay.
Moving over to 23rd overall, we have the Arizona Cardinals selecting Marvin Leel, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. This is one of those moves where they need to get better up front. Obviously, they're going to be losing not Calais Campbell, but why am I forgetting his name? Their edge rusher. Chandler Jones, there we go.
Yeah.
They're going to be losing out on Chandler Jones. They need someone to come in and help fill these shoes. I do think Leel is going to be one of those guys that year one is going to get you double-digit sacks. I think he's probably going to end up being in that range of like 7 to 8, but he's going to constantly be a good edge rusher for you and just a good run blocker as well.
Yeah, that's a smart pickup for them. They're losing some of their defensive players, and they gotta fix that, because Kyler Murray can't be putting up 40 points a game every game.
I agree. Moving over to the 24th overall pick, I have the Dallas Cowboys selecting Daxton Hill, safety out of Michigan. I think this is probably one of their more needed positions. The Cowboys have been looking for safety help the last couple of years. Daxton Hill is one of those, he's a utility knife. You can let him do a lot of things. You can put him, kind of more upfront as a linebacker. He can be good there too. You can put him at nickel. You can put him at outside corner if you really need to. You can put him at either of the safety positions. He is going to be effective for them. He is going to help that young defense out so much more than you can believe.
Right, that defense just gets scarier every year.
It really, really does.
Maybe that's why Washington brought in Carson Wentz. They just needed a dummy that could get hit a bunch while Kenny Pickett learns the game.
Exactly, maybe. Moving to the 25th overall pick, I have the Buffalo Bills selecting Jameson Williams, wide receiver out of Alabama. Wow, that was a mouthful. Jesus. But yeah, I think the Bills, they don't really have a whole lot of holes on their team. I think wide receiver, they can just help add even more weapons and threats for Josh Allen to throw to. And Williams, obviously he's coming off of that injury from the national championship game, but he was one of the best wide receivers in all of football last year. I think you would have seen him go before the Ohio State receivers if he didn't have that injury. But I do think for the Bills, this is a phenomenal pickup. They just add more weapons for Josh Allen.
Yeah, definitely. The Bills are in an excellent position right now where they can legitimately build their team for the future through the draft. Because you're so solid at pretty much every position already. You're picking up depth guys. You're picking up guys that you go, okay, you're going to be our starter once this guy that's ahead of you starts asking for too much money. we'll move on from him, and then it's you.
Exactly, and it's one of those things of going, how many years of Stephon Diggs do you really have as that superstar elite wide receiver? How many more do you still
Right.
have left in that?
And you never know. You find a gem in one of these guys, and then all of a sudden, Stephon Diggs becomes a really nice trade piece for you.
Exactly, it's kind of looking at Justin Jefferson when the Vikings traded him away and instantly selected Justin Jefferson, making it fairly seamless. But with
Yeah.
the 26th overall pick, I have the Tennessee Titans selecting Trevor Penning, offensive tackle from Northern Iowa. Again, this is solely to help out their offense, whether it is Tannehill at quarterback or someone else, might be a rookie, might be someone else, but it just helps out Derrick Henry. Again, it's not super sexy. This just helps out the team, and their defense this year was vastly improved. So I think they splurge on an offensive lineman here. And plus, they
Yeah.
could be losing both of their starting tackles, which could really affect them in this part, and they're going to need one of those offensive tackles coming out. I like this pick of Penning to them.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. You got to have guys to open up holes for Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I agree. With the 27th overall pick, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selecting Zion Johnson, offensive lineman out of Boston College. Now, with Zion Johnson, I would love to see him fall to my Chicago Bears. With him, he's one of those guys that can play guard or center in the NFL. I view him more as a guard, but obviously, the Buccaneers look like they're going to lose their star center. You can instantly slot him in there, and whoever's playing at quarterback, whether Tom Brady decides to say, fuck it, I'm going to come back for another year, or whether it's the kid that they drafted in the second round last year, we will see. But you need guys to protect them. That's
Yep.
for damn sure. Moving over to the 28th overall pick, I have the Green Bay Packers selecting Treylon Burks, wide receiver out of Arkansas. To me, this feels like a really, really good pairing with him and Devontae Adams. He's big, he can catch the ball, he can move, and this just feels like building a number one wide receiver for after Devontae Adams leaves.
Which could be right away. Is he not a free agent this year?
Franchise tagged.
Oh, they tagged him. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense because I do believe they still have Valdez Scantling as well.
He is actually going to be in free agency.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought they still had him for another year.
Moving over to the 29th overall pick, we have the Miami Dolphins. I forget who they had this with trading.
49ers.
49ers, you are correct. But I have them selecting, oh my God, Bernard Raniel, offensive tackle out of Michigan. You need to protect Tua. If we are going to see truly what Tua is capable of in the NFL, you need to protect him. I think Tua still could be a decent quarterback in the NFL, but you need to keep him healthy, and this is a way that you keep him healthy.
Oh, there's a lot of questions around the Dolphins still, though. I mean, are they going to be picking to win, or are they going to be picking to tank?
True. But this is one of those moves that I think helps them pick to win.
Yes.
Moving over to 30th overall, I have the Kansas City Chiefs selecting Andrew Booth Jr., corner out of Clemson. Again, with the Chiefs, it's kind of hard to figure out where they're going to go and what their best need is. I think, obviously, with Russell Wilson coming in and with how good that division is wide receiver-wise, adding a really, really good corner to your team is definitely not going to hurt.
No, that's a must for Kansas City. Their defense, especially the secondary, is going to need some help.
Yeah, I agree. Moving over to 31st overall, not really big shock here for the Cincinnati Bengals, but I have them taking offensive tackle Dareen Kinnard out of Kentucky. I truly do believe that they are going to just completely overload. They're going to be bringing in free agents, and with their first pick, they have just said, Joe, we are not letting you get touched. We are going to build gold. We are going to build a castle wall around you. And
yeah, we're not letting you get sacked 9 times in a playoff game again.
we're not letting you get sacked the third most by any quarterback in the history of the NFL in one season, including playoffs.
Yeah.
That is what they're saying here. And just by looking at this picture, he is a mean bastard. You not only see it in the picture, you see it on the field.
Yep.
And with the Lions, with their second pick in the first round, obviously coming from the LA Rams in that Matthew Stafford trade, I have them selecting Desmond Ridder, quarterback out of Cincinnati. He is my number 3 quarterback in this year's draft. I think you draft him now because you get him on that 5-year contract, 4 years with that 5th-year option, and you get him to sit behind, you get him to sit for a year, learn the NFL, and then allow him to take over. You can get him, you know what, he might even be even better to replace a Jared Goff halfway through the season if Goff just isn't doing anything. This is a move for them going into the future.
Right. Even if Goff is doing it, if you see great strides from Ridder and he looks like he's ready to start playing, then all of a sudden you got Goff that you can throw out there for a trade and get some more picks back for next year's draft.
Oh, exactly. I 100% agree.
It's smart. The Lions need to start looking for their franchise quarterback, and that is probably the best option they're going to get for a few years.
I have to agree with you on that one. And so obviously, just because I want to include some of the teams that don't have first round picks, obviously I'm a Bears fan. We don't have a first round pick, and I want to do a Bears pick. So we are going to include some of the other teams. Unfortunately, the LA Rams, I don't know when their next pick is. It's not in the first round. It's not in the second round. It's not in the third round. Looking all the way into the fourth, I have no idea who's going to be there. So I'm not even going to try to predict for them. But with the 39th overall pick, I have the Chicago Bears selecting David Bell, wide receiver out of Purdue. This kid is a phenomenal prospect. You can put him at the slot receiver position. Obviously, we saw what the slot receiver position did for the Super Bowl MVP winner this year in Cooper Kupp. If you have a phenomenal guy at that slot position, you can do a lot of damage and a lot of really good things. And I think you pair David Bell, at that slot with, Darnell Mooney on the outside, you have 2 phenomenal young receivers for Justin Fields to continue to grow and develop with.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Unfortunately, why you don't see Chris Olave on this list is I don't see him making it past the top 5 in the second round if he doesn't get picked up in the first round. So that is why.
I agree. I mean, looking at that, like the Jets have two picks in the second round as well. I could see them possibly taking him, even the Jacksonville Jaguars with that first pick in the second round.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With the Indianapolis Colts and their first pick, 47th overall, I have them selecting Sam Howell, quarterback out of North Carolina. They don't have a quarterback right now. When I made this mock draft, this was still before the Carson Wentz trade, and I said, even if they have Carson Wentz on the team, I'm still picking them Sam Howell because they need a quarterback. They need to move on from Wentz. Yeah. And to me, this kid just feels like if you put him in a good team, he's going to be able to do some good things.
And yeah, definitely agree. With or without Wentz, they're trying to get a quarterback, and if you can get one partway through, in the top 10 of the second round, then you go for it.
Without a doubt. And finally, the Denver Donkey Broncos with the 64th pick, the last pick in the second round. I have them selecting Christian Watson, wide receiver out of North Dakota State. This is a guy that I would love to see join the Bears potentially in the third round, but the Broncos, they just brought in Russell Wilson. Getting a guy like Christian Watson would be absolutely huge for them. I think Broncos fans would love to have this kid on their team, and Russell Wilson would be a big fan of him. 6'4", can run in the 4.3s. A lot of things to like. His hands, he will catch everything.
Yeah. And as we discussed earlier, that's important for Denver. They need offensive weapons for Russell Wilson.
That indeed they do.
Yeah, I don't think you can just run with Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton as your 1-2. It's not good enough for that division.
I fully agree. And so that is the end of the mock draft. So Sterling, what'd you think of it?
Good. I mean, I was giving you feedback as we went. There were a couple I sort of disagree with you on, and we'll see how it shakes out when the day finally comes. I still haven't decided if I'm going to take the day off to watch it or if I'm just going to watch updates on my phone while I'm at work.
Yep.
No.
Well, for that NFL draft for day 1 and day 2, I will be streaming it live, going pick by pick with it. Sterling might be there with me. But yeah, today, really good conversation. A lot of fun. A lot of big news happening to talk about this week. Next week is gonna also feel like a really big week.
Well, yeah, the league year starts up this week, so
free agency.
I think, exactly, we're going to see a lot of movement, I think. So there'll be next week.
Yeah, but that is all we have time for, and we've been talking for quite a bit of non-stop football action. We want to thank you all for coming out with us and having a chat with us. I'm Brendan Donald. Thank you, Sterling, for coming out, as always, talking with us. We'll see you guys next time.